Tom Slater is here. Very good morning to you, Tom. We've got a lot of different stories this morning. A lot of people concentrating on the anniversary yesterday of the discovery of Auschwitz and Holocaust Memorial Day. We'll get onto that in a moment. Lots of stories about two-tier policing and extremism. But should we start with The Sun? Which has got the story of the sacked referee David Coote. Quite a strange story, this. I mean, it was strange when it came out last year when there were, of course, videos recorded and sent to The Sun of how he was having a go at Jurgen Klopp, having a go at various other people in the world of football. He's now apparently apologising for that because there was also one of him snorting what appeared to be cocaine. He's now said that he was driven to snort the cocaine because he's frightened of coming out in the macho world of the Premier League because he's now declared himself to be gay. I mean, it may well be that people will have a lot of sympathy for him. I'm not one of those people, I'm afraid.
I mean, it's hard to join the dots, isn't it? I mean, you got caught doing something that you really shouldn't have been caught doing. Not only, as you say, taking illicit drugs, but also making comments about Jurgen Klopp and Scousers and Liverpool, which if you're a Premier League referee, it's probably not a great idea to be filmed doing that. A lack of judgement is a very weak way of putting it, I suppose. It may well also be the case that he struggled with his sexuality and he struggled to come out, but to connect those two that cleanly might lead some more cynical or sceptical people to suggest that this is an attempt to sort of deflect responsibility than it is actually to fess up to. Because
at least one of the videos, I think, was filmed while he was on duty for UEFA in Europe at an actual tournament. You know, which has nothing to do with being gay or your sexuality or anything else. You know, it just shows you to have an appalling lack of judgment and to be somebody who's not fit for the job that you're actually paid quite well to do.
And, you know, there is an element of this story which was, I mean, I out of all of it, I almost had the most condemnation for whoever filmed it and then, you know, sold it or shared it around, because that way in which people's even kind of private interactions, wrong though they might be, suddenly become public fodder is an unfortunate trend. But you also do think, why, if you are a figure who is so prominent, who is on television every weekend, and there's so much controversy around any refereeing decision, to allow yourself to get into that position, obviously.
And also, he wasn't being filmed surreptitiously. He was openly being filmed. He knew he was being filmed. In fact, I think he was encouraged him to film him doing whatever he was doing. And there are plenty of other pieces of film, apparently, of him doing the rounds as well. So, anyway, that's that. Should we move on to this ridiculous story, both in the Times and in the Telegraph, about this Home Office review? Basically, claims of two-tier policing, says the Times, are an extreme right-wing narrative, according to an internal Home Office review that has recommended sweeping changes to how extremism is counted. And they go on to describe how basically extremism can be pretty much anything. They don't really define it. They just go, well, we have to redefine extremism. So it might be that if you don't agree with me on something, or you don't agree with the Home Office or the government, you're an extremist. That seems to be what the conclusion that they've come to. This is such a bad joke. I mean, this was this review, this rapid analytical sprint, which was the bizarre way that Yvette Cooper announced it, when they first came in to say that our extremism processes aren't up to snuff. So what they've done is they've redefined almost everyone in the country to be an extremist. That's the way that they want to sort this out. As you say, if you complain about two-tier policing, you might be a right-wing extremist. If you are concerned about grooming gangs, that's something that can be jumped upon by right-wing extremists. And this is the problem that our counter-extremism services have had for a very long time. Many reviews, many critics are pointing this out, which is that this desperate desire to put more and more people into that category demonises mainstream positions in society and also deflects attention away from where it should be, which, if you look at MI5 terrorism caseload, 3/4 of it is Islamist extremism, yet we're running around talking about whether talking about two-tier policing is something that should lead you to get your collar felt. Exactly, and we talked about this yesterday, and we'll talk about it some more today with Trevor Phillips, who's on later. He's written a column in The Sun today about Prevent and about how, you know, the system actually, up until the moment that the Southport killer was referred to Prevent, seemed to work okay, because, you know, here's a guy who was somehow spotted in school as a technically dangerous individual who might be subject to becoming an extremist or a violent person. And so he was flagged up, he was reported to Prevent, and then nothing happened. And so it's the system from that point on, it seems to me, that's going wrong, because they don't really want it to be true. And therefore they go, oh, here's an ethnic minority person, we better be very careful how we go. And also, why not? Because it's a voluntary scheme. If the person doesn't wish to be, you know, dealt with by the voluntary scheme, then they're not. No, which seems completely mad to me. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, on the one hand, even if he was a case that could have been dealt with through the Prevent and then the Channel programme, this kind of counter-extremism thing, if they did decide he was more politically or religiously motivated, as you say, it's a voluntary
scheme. If the individual is so committed, they're not going to engage with it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Then if you have these categories like Ruda Cabana seem to be, which is someone who's just more generally fascinated with violence, disturbed, depraved, what have you. The idea that in a kind of very computer says no way, they're like, well, he's not an extremist by our current definitions, therefore see you later.
So he's not a terrorist either, by their definition, which was all invented, it seems to me, by Keir Starmer when he gave that press conference last week to basically explain why this guy wasn't reported to be a terrorist and why, at the time, it was said not to be a terrorist-related incident.
Well, in a way, this is an example of like when those things fall through the cracks, because you've got a figure like this who is in possession of some terrorist material but doesn't seem to be a kind of dyed-in-the-wall anything. He's just depraved.
Yeah.
The idea that at that point the states would like, anyway, good luck.
Yeah.
Is ridiculous.
It's bonkers, isn't it? It really is. And the more you read of all of this, it makes even less sense. Extremists could be opportunistic, exploiting and twisting topical issues to fit narratives. The example included grooming gangs, right? Right-wing extremists frequently exploit cases of alleged group-based sexual abuse. What's alleged about it? There are people going to prison literally every couple of months now. There's live cases all over the place. You know, this has been going on for 20 years. We now know, thanks to people like Maggie Oliver, thanks to, you know, various different journalists who wrote, I think it was The Times that wrote about it in 2011, and all of the Elon Musk-related stuff that's been happening lately. The idea that they still say in the Home Office, alleged group-based sexual abuse to promote anti-Muslim sentiment, as well as related anti-government and anti-political correctness narratives. I mean, it's quite disgusting, actually.
Yeah, then they can't get away with this sort of deflection anymore.
And this is now we really understand probably a lot better why the Home Office is failing at all the jobs that it's meant to do. You know, whether it's the border force business, whether it's asylum seekers, whether it's sending people back, whether it's deporting people, whether it's prosecuting people. You know, all of that is obviously not being done properly because the people in the Home Office think this stuff rubbish.
No, absolutely. They're institutionally, politically correct. The Home Office, the counter-extremism services, that's why you've got a situation in which a review like this can come out, a situation in which Prevent is spending vast amounts of its time on right-wing extremism as opposed to Islamist extremism, even though we all know where the main threat comes from.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting the speed with which the Labour Party, particularly Dan Jarvis, but also people around David Coote, quickly disavowed this review, said they rejected its recommendations. I think that indicates that they at least recognise that they can't carry on making statements or being attached to statements like this anymore because the public won't have it, and that's a small, you know,
I suppose a small
lining.
step in the right direction. I mean, clearly they think that it's right-wing extremism to talk about grooming gangs. Well, it isn't. It's not right-wing extremism to talk about two-tier policing, because it is something that exists in this country and everybody sees it. We've all seen it with our own eyes, you know. Even now, pro-Palestinian marches go on and people barely get arrested. I mean, they've only started now arresting people a little bit more than they used to, but at the beginning there was literally no arrest being made at all. You know, absolutely ridiculous. We've got lots and lots of clips for you this morning, by the way. We're going to start getting to them because one of the things we're going to talk about is all of the coverage in the papers this morning of what happened at Auschwitz yesterday. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to kick it off with something that happened yesterday on ITV, right? This is Good Morning Britain. If you listen carefully, you might wonder whether there's a word missing from this particular report.
King Charles will become the first British head of state to visit Auschwitz-Birkenau later today as part of events to mark 80 years since the liberation of the Nazi death camp. 6 million people were killed in concentration camps during the Second World War, as well as millions of others because they were Polish, disabled, gay, or belonged to another ethnic group.
Yeah, millions of people and some other people. I mean, the word missing would be...
It's on the tip of my tongue.
It's on the tip of my tongue. What can you say? Maybe the autocue at ITV rejects the word and you can't actually write Jewish in there, or Jew. You know, you can about Jewish, 6 million Jewish people were killed. What's wrong with saying that?
You can only pray that this was just some horrendous slip-up. But this is a slip-up
I
that
don't think
keeps
it
happening.
was. I can say with pretty much surety that it was not a slip-up.
Because there is this tendency, whenever the Holocaust comes up, this unique horror, the greatest crime of history, to want to kind of generalise it. So people will swiftly say, well, of course, many other people were killed. Yes, but that's not what the point.
But they've managed to say 6 million people and many other people without actually mentioning Jewish people.
To actually omit Jewish people. What usually happens
they've omitted them.
What usually happens is they mention the tremendous Jewish suffering and then will make a point of saying that other people suffered.
They've done both.
True, But in this case, which is true, but also it's this weird attempt to try and generalise what was obviously a very specific, concerted, totally unprecedented and horrific campaign to exterminate Jews from Europe. That was the point of the Holocaust, the final solution. To try and just present it as just another form of bigotry and hate amongst many is to engage in a form of like relativising the Holocaust, to dilute it. So that goes on all the time. To completely admit the Jews from the story completely, that's a new low.
I think it is.
I don't know how they could have even ended up in this position.
No, I can't imagine how they got there. But I mean, it's typical of what happens in this day and age now, where you've got people who have got sort of, you know, relativism running through their veins and say, yeah, but what about this? You know, we had the same problem with the President of Ireland the other day, making a speech. He was asked not to make a speech about, you know, what was happening currently in the Middle East while making a commemorative speech about the Holocaust. But he did it anyway. And then they started dragging people out who were complaining. It's ridiculous. Anyway, we'll come back to that. A lot of coverage this morning. King Charles, of course, was over there as well. Princess Kate as well, the Princess of Wales. We'll also bring you more on David Coote. We've got a couple of clips of him talking about this story that's on the front page of The Sun.